I know that it's probably the very top bit of this that you want to talk about. Give us 5 minutes. Can you give us 5 minutes just to quickly give you a little update on what's happening from the bottom up? Because I think it's really important, and I know the most important thing is the tip of the pyramid, what you see on a Saturday in the first team, and you will want to ask questions about that, but I think just updating on this is a good thing to do. So, the stuff we do in the local community. We had a really good meeting last week with Cambridgeshire County Council that we're going to work with. They're coming back in to see us next week. We're in about 35 schools now. That's probably trebled, quadrupled, whatever it is, from where we were when effectively the community department had to close down a few years ago. So lots of good work's being done every week. There's over 500 kids every single week getting coached by Cambridge United in a variety of sports in local primary schools. And that isn't just football, that's dance, fencing, archery, gymnastics, loads of different sports. And not just in school, loads of project-led individual work that Nigel Ashman covers with different authorities where we target different minority groups, different needy groups, where we can do something that's tailor-made for them. So there's a huge amount of work being done. We do obviously courses every school holiday, but the number of schools we're working with is growing, and our target is that by the time we get to the end of this academic year, we'll be in over 50 schools. And the reaction we got from Cambridge County Council, and that's just a little example of what Dave was saying about how everyone can help. The leader of the county council is a governor, I believe, at the same school as Stuart Wood. Yeah. So we come to the Wrexham game, which was a good way of creating a good impression. But he came to meet us last week with a couple of his colleagues, and he's just, number one, really impressed with the work that we do within the community. Number two, totally surprised by it because he didn't know about it. And that's a big challenge for us, is making sure that we get the wider community to know a little bit about what we do. So there's a lot of good work going on there, and like I say, literally hundreds and hundreds of kids every week benefiting from what we're doing. And we've probably got now, we have an apprentice scheme where we have apprentice coaches and part-time coaches where we've got 12 to 15 coaches working in schools every week. Next bit, Dave. Regional development centres, and there's a little link in between the two of those now as well, because we run some community football stuff, because even though the numbers in those centres you won't believe, we're now about 950 players in our development centres, and you might think that means anybody gets in and it's really simple to get in. The opposite's true in actual fact. We've had to create a tier below that whereby we run match days, match nights for some kids that can't actually get into that system because the quality every year is actually going up. So we have a network really, or a net that spreads 30 to 40 miles north, south, east and west of Cambridge, where if there's an under 6, under 7 player upwards, we know about them. We might not have signed them, they might have chosen a Tottenham or an Arsenal or a Chelsea in front of us, but we'd know about them, and there's a pretty good chance they'll be in a development centre with James Cutting and a group of coaches. And it's a really, that's vital for everything. That underpins everything we do in terms of finance, to make the trust self-sustaining, but also is our way of scouting players. And the crucial thing when you look at younger players going into our academy is getting them at the right age, because once they sign for a football club, that's it. We can't get them out of a bigger club. We have to get them first. We have to work harder than the likes of the Norwiches, the Ipswiches, the North London clubs and whatever to get those kids. So James does a magnificent job in that. And little things, I've probably told you this before, but going that extra little mile of DVDs about what they're going to do in training being sent to them each week. Action shots of first team players and scholars demonstrating the skill of the week that they're going to then be coached at on the night of their training session. Little things that other clubs don't do, which is what sets us apart. So yeah, the badge on the shirt might not be as big as Tottenham, Chelsea, Arsenal, but what we give them is better, and that's why we have loads of kids coming at those centres. Shadow squads. So this is the link between these kids that play every week for their coach team, their mini league team, get training once a week. The best ones obviously get promoted into this, which is almost like what it says, the group below our academy. So these continue to play in their Sunday league teams. They train with us once a week. We run it all the way through to under 18s now, so we've even got a shadow scholarship group that runs at Cambridge Regional College. And every school holiday for the 7s to 16s, we'll play against whether it's Luton, whether it's Norwich, whether it's Ipswich, professional clubs with similar schemes where those boys will get their football in half terms, train the rest of the time, go on tour at the end of the season, but continue playing for their own club. So that's almost like a little bit, if you want to be crude about it, in terms of promoting players, a sifting process now where the best kids get selected from here will go into these development squads, shadow squads, where they're playing football in matches as well as just training, with a view to, Dave, if you put the next bit on, going into our academy. And this is the best players, if you like. These are the players that we hope and believe have the potential to be scholars of the future. I wrote about it in my programme notes, I don't know if anyone read them the other week, about the EPPP. It means that football classification for youth development has changed in the last year from the FA. Some good, some bad. What it basically means is that the FA believe, and the Premier League more importantly believes, so then the FA do, that the biggest clubs will develop the best players. So it really gives a big advantage to the biggest clubs in the country to sign more players. There's a formula now where they can sign players from other clubs at a lot smaller cost in terms of compensation. The demands in terms of budget, in terms of staff, in terms of facilities are huge. So there's 4 categories. Category 1, really, for your Man United, your Liverpools, your Tottenhams, your Chelseas. Category 2, slightly watered down but tough for even bigger clubs to get into. And Category 3, where a lot of Football League clubs will be, suddenly there's a big question mark for them, because they've got to put money in to match the funding they're getting, and the way that the Football League and the FA will now audit them is a lot more stringent than it's been done in the past. So I imagine what's going to happen in the next few years is a lot of smaller clubs will close their youth systems. A lot more. And a lot of clubs are now anticipating something that we've had to live with for the last 7 years, which is you have to fund yourselves. You have to be able to at least put the funding in that you get from other authorities. So it puts us in a good position, I think. That group now, and I'll try and explain this, but when the club closed their youth system down back after the club got relegated, so what would that be? That would be 2005, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
The damage that does is it can't be repaired for 10 years. Because whatever you do, however many games you get in the meantime, where we can bring a Luke Berry in from someone else, and Josh Coulson comes from another club, and we can sign Blaine Hudson who gets released by Norwich, and we can sign Jonathan Thorpe who gets released by Leicester at 16, and we can sign James Brighton who gets released from Birmingham, we sign Luke Allen who gets released by Tottenham. The bottom line is, the first kid that we'll recruit that isn't at another club, 7, 8 years old. So the first group that we recruited in 2006 are now our under-15s. There's a lad in there, Jake Shaw, Dylan Williams, they were with us since they're 7, 8 years old. So that's how old they are now. So in the scholars that we've brought through so far, none of them have been with us since they're 8 years old. They've been players, maybe Luke Berry at another club, maybe Adam Marriott at another club, maybe Josh Coulson at another club, but most of them have been players that we've brought in either at 14, like Roars, who's been released by Norwich, or 16, like the ones I've just mentioned that have been from other clubs. These now don't play the Northamptons, the Colchesters, the Gillinghams. We played on Sunday, but the fixtures aren't just those smaller Football League clubs. The lads so far this year have played Chelsea, they've played Tottenham, they've played Arsenal, they've played Nottingham Forest, they've played Birmingham City, they've played Coventry City. We're going to the northwest for a tour with our Litlands at Easter from 8s to 12s. We used to be really, really grateful for 3 fixtures, which was Crewe, Wrexham and Tranmere. We've already agreed that we're playing Man United and Man City, and we're just haggling over whether it's Liverpool or Everton. We can't fit Blackburn in. It's unbelievable the progress that's been made at that level. And the reason that we can play these clubs is that we do ourselves justice in the fixtures. So we give them good competitive games. We don't like to publicise results because it's not about results. I don't want to get into the thing where we're justifying a youth scheme by going, oh, we beat these 3-1 and we drew 2-2, and talking about 9 and 10-year-olds like you would a first team. But clubs only play if you're competitive. You know, we went to Tottenham's training ground in pre-season, unbelievable, £42 million, fantastic facilities, and we're competitive at every age group, right up to under-16s. I watched the game. We got beat 2-1. It was the morning of the Mansfield game. That was a good day for the soul that day, wasn't it? Good in the afternoon, but in the morning, got beat 2-1 by Tottenham, late goal, and the players were superb, as good as their counterparts. So, Mark Tracy, Tom Pell, James Cutting, the work that gets done there, which is work that you don't really see, is fantastic and it's a credit. The training ground that we use, the first team, the Scholars, is the venue for the academy, and again, the facility is fantastic. You've heard about it in the summer when people signed and talked about it, but the biggest thing as well is we can now get clubs to come to us. So the likes of the Coventrys and the Birminghams and people like that would always used to say to us, like, you can bring a team up to us, but we won't risk coming to you, because the preconceived idea of a conference club would be, you know, it's probably the Coldham's Common sort of scenario on a Sunday morning. But we're better than that, and the fixture list probably tells you that more than anything. So it's quite exciting for us, for me, for the staff, when we think about what might happen in the next 5 years, when boys that have been with us all the way through have got to play against the Tottenhams and the Arsenals and Chelsea. So in other words, the best players in this country at their age group, when they start coming through into the scholarship positions. I think that's an exciting prospect for the club. And listen, we all know what goes with the territory, especially when you're in a first team environment. I think one criticism that perhaps is wrong of the club is that suddenly everything from there downwards is wrong. I don't think that's quite right. You know, sometimes we get it wrong out there, but I think there's a lot of good players and a lot of good talent. And if you consider that in the last 7 years, every single club that we play will have benefited from grants of over £1 million, and we've done it for nothing, I think it's credit to the people, the staff and the players in that system. Magnificent. Next one, Dave. Scholars. We've had a board meeting with Bonds about his results. I'm only joking. The scholarship scheme is the link, and at the moment we've had to, like I said, circumnavigate that, because if we came here, what was it, 6.5 years ago, and we said, right, in 10 years' time we'll produce one player for the first team, so be patient with us. It's a long way, isn't it? So we've had to make sure we make fast gains, sign them at 16, get them into the scholarship programme. We're fortunate with a few that we had in a system somewhere else, but the long-term benefit of everything that happens here will be seen here, because instead of us having to work really hard the next 3 months to find 16-year-olds that have been released by the clubs, and we're totally reliant on what development they've put into those players over the last 6, 7, 8 years, we'll have been able to do that ourselves. We've still got good talent in that group, I'll tell you. Richard will say the same later. You know, you can look at results. We made a couple of decisions this year. One was we wouldn't play third years in our team, in the CRC team. So in the past, I mean, the years where we went close to winning that league, the Blaine Hudsons, the Luke Berries, the Liam Hugheses, Adam Marriott, Jordan Patrick, they played long after their 2-year scholarship. We decided this year we'd play a youth team in the competition. We sent James Brighton and Luke Allen out on loan to play for Cambridge City, because we thought their development would be better suited at that level rather than still playing in the Eastern Counties League, what's it called now, the Thurlow non-league. So that impacts that it's tough for them, and it's character building. And the first year we were here, we were bottom of the league with about 10 or 12 games to go by about 12 points, and we found a way of staying up. And they'll do the same. They'll find a little bit out of it, and it makes men of them, and that's the important thing. So there's good players in that group. There's good second years. You've seen Liam Hurst in the first team or around it, and there's plenty of good talented players in that. Development squad, again, I'll talk, you're bound to ask about the summer later on, but we looked at it, and we've got some good young players that aren't all going to be ready or all able to play in the first team all at the same time. So by that, Luke Berry, would you say is? Yes. Yeah, so Luke Berry is, and Luke Berry was when he's 18 years old. If you have 3 or 4 players within the same age bracket, you can't all go in the team at the same time to get your first 15, 20 games. So we looked at that. We think Liam Hughes has got a chance. We might be in a minority of 4, me, Richard, the other Richard and Gina, and Dave, but he's got a chance. What we anticipated with this group, 18 to 21s, the Luke Berry, the Liam Hugheses, the Adam Marriotts, the James Brightons, the Luke Allens, was their football will be outside of this club, maybe, to get those games, to get that match experience. So they're the ones that we want to try and loan out and make sure they're playing regularly. Someone like Hughes is really difficult to loan out because of what we've said in the press, but it's important that there's a bridge. And someone like Luke Allen, who wasn't ready at 18, but has got potential, we've got to make sure we don't discard those players too quickly, in our opinion. We've got to give them time to develop. And then the first team, so I'll sit down. Don't know how much of this to say really. I think, I'll keep looking at your t-shirts, put me off. The most important thing, in my opinion, is that working for this football club moving forward. I can say this now that I'm not the manager, but we will not, in the current situation, unless something majorly different happens, we will not be able to compete financially with a significant number of teams in this league to be able to win promotion by getting the best players on the biggest money. That's just a fact. That's a fact. So we've got to find a different way of doing it. And we have got something that not many clubs have got, a youth system that produces players. So we've got to find a way of making sure that that philosophy, that ethos can continue into the future, especially when we think about players that are going to come through this. So for me, that position at the top is quite difficult to combine with ensuring all of that happens on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis. I always felt, I didn't know when, but I thought I'd know the moment where I needed to step away from doing it. And I did. So I did. We can all argue whether that was too late, too early, whatever else, but I knew, so that was the best person to judge it. I then knew we needed someone at the top of that pyramid who would believe in it and also whose strengths were suited to it. And that's what we've got. Because there's a big difference, in my opinion, between a manager and a coach. Right? I was a manager. Nolan coached the players 75–80% of the time. Richard's a coach. Richard's on the training ground working with our young players, working with our first team players. And we didn't need a manager, we needed a coach. Very, very good one. And very rare that you get someone who's an excellent coach who can also do the bits and pieces of making sure that he looks after the team and plays them in the right way and is experienced at winning football matches. So my message would be for us to ensure continuity. That was the right decision. In terms of the best person we could ever possibly expect to get to manage this club, coach this club in this league, I think we've done brilliantly to get him. I'll say that for him. And I think this will bring success for the club. But everyone wants it quicker. It's a fact. Everyone wants it on a Saturday. The product has to be good. Results have to be good. I was a little bit surprised, if you want to be honest, at the start of the season, how quick we got into a crisis and how quick things happened. Took me by surprise maybe a little bit, in terms of what we've been through in the last 3 years. But this is important that we make sure this is something the club's built on. We've got to make sure that at the top end, we find a way of signing experienced players with the right quality to make the team better and to help some of these younger players develop without, as I said, being able to pay the wages that some clubs pay. Because when you sign players, if you sign them with a younger age group, the risk factor goes up because you're signing unproven talent. If you go out and you sign experienced players, the risk is less because their track record tells you everything about them, but the cost is greater. So in the last few weeks I went up to Scotland, I'm going to Ireland this week, I had a day in the Czech Republic last week because we've got good contacts over there. We've got to find a way of getting a little market where we can bring players into this club on affordable wages, because I'm telling you, our wages are, in some cases, we're paying our senior players probably a third of what other clubs are doing in this league.
And we didn't cover your expenses.
Well, that's no worry about that. Not yet. There are serious payers in this league. You know, and I can say that now because I'm not hiding behind that as a reason for winning or losing a football match. And we can't compete with that. So we have to do something differently. And the only thing I'd say is, from our perspective, is we can still compete there with loads of hard work, commitment and doing things differently, even though everybody else financially will blow us out of the water. And clubs look at us and go, how can you do it? Well, we do it by working really hard and being really committed, having good people. And that's what we've got to do at the first team level. Difference is, it's in the public domain, isn't it? It's in the public spotlight and you don't get time. It's got to be done straight away. But that's the challenge, and with someone like Richard and his experience, that will help us. And I think we're a stronger club for the change, and I think with that behind us, we've got a bright future. And I think that sometimes when results are wrong, the odd performance is wrong, it's easy to say everything's wrong. I think that's the last thing that's true. I think there's a lot of good things at the club, and we've just got to translate them on a Saturday afternoon. Okay? Thanks for your time, and if there's any questions, I'll or will take them.
Yeah, now, what holds these youngsters to the club? I mean, are they under contract? I mean, if you get really good ones, can they be poached, or what's the situation with that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. The first fact, being honest with you, is that they love it so much, and I'm being honest with you, that we have very, very few players leave us. I mean, I remember probably a couple of years ago, we had an under-9 poached by Norwich office, and he went, lived in Norwich and he went, but very few players do we lose, and that's because of, number one, if they went to play for a Colchester or a Southend or whatever else, ridiculously, even though they're a Football League club, they wouldn't get a games programme as good as they get with us. The kids go on tours every year. You know, we're going to play in a tournament beginning of January, where went to it last year. They'll play best teams in Germany, Bayern Munich, Borussia Dortmund, Borussia Mönchengladbach. Some of the experiences they get with us are unbelievable. So there's a goodwill element, and the fact that parents want what's best for their kids. So if it's brilliant, they love it, and they get everything here that they would get at a bigger club, why go to a bigger club? Especially when they see the progression at this club. That would be naive to think we'd never ever lose a player, and we've had a situation of 1 or 2 clubs where we refuse to play them because we know they're going to try and poach our players. I mean, one, you know, you'll know who they are, but they're up the A1. Yeah, and there's no point in us playing them because A, they ain't very good, and B, I'm telling you as it is. I'm telling you how it is, and B, they'll try and speak to the parents in the car park. Don't do things in the right way. So we don't need to play those sort of clubs. We get a lot of respect from the bigger clubs. We had a young goalkeeper signed for Arsenal last year. They paid us compensation for him, even though they've been with us just 1 year and they didn't have to. Rules don't say they have to. So I think the bigger clubs, the right clubs, show some respect to us. The kids a lot.
Blackburn, didn't it?
Blackburn did with Jackson Ram, yeah, a few years ago, and Arsenal did, as I said, in the summer with a young goalkeeper. So it's the odd one, and I think that if it's a chance for a kid to go to an Arsenal, a Blackburn, a Tottenham, we don't want to stand in anybody's way. We want to do the right thing, but we want to protect the club as well and make sure that we get some compensation. We get add-ons if the kid does something in the future, and that gets reinvested into the policy, so that helps, you know, future players. I think that there's now a formula, if you like, to work out compensation. And one club that we've had a few issues with over the past, who want to play us, we've said, look, if you say that you're going to pay compensation to players and you respect that right that we have, we'll play you. And they've come up with an agreement, we've signed that agreement between the 2 clubs, so we'll play them again. So we're in a stronger position than you'd think as a little conference club, which is good. We punch above our weight, and we've got a lot of respect from a lot of bigger clubs that you wouldn't think that we would have gained.
What is the age that you actually can sign an adult contract?
18.
18.
Yeah. So on their 18th birthday. We have some contracts, well, we have agreements with all the kids and their parents, whether we would end up ever trying to take that agreement, you know, that's one of them where it depends how much, how long the kid had been in it. But I think that there is an amount of goodwill and trust that goes on here, and that's where we're at really.
Thank you.
I think you need to understand that Norwich will lose players to Arsenal. And Man United. And Man City.
Being in such a shop window as well is a draw to this youth system, in that people don't feel that they're turning their back on an opportunity in their Premiership because they could still be drawn into it.
I think the biggest thing for kids, this is my view, right? Good facilities, good coaching, good games programme, good people. If you can provide all that, don't matter what league the first team playing, because when you're 9 and 10, has it got any relevance whatsoever? Not really, in all honesty. And that's why I think the rules about youth funding are crazy, because what we give a 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old, don't matter whether our first team's in the Football League or not in the Football League. But that's the dividing line for the rules. So I think that a lot of the parents here, number one, they can see progression. They see players come through the youth system into the first team. They see how committed the club is for it. But also, they train at good venues, they play on a good pitch, they get good fixtures, they get good coaching, and there's good people looking after them. So I think that's why we keep them.
How many other conference clubs have got a similar youth setup?
Luton still have one, and they're decent, Luton, and they've produced players over the years. Wrexham, and they produce players, and we've got to know them quite well. I would say they're the only two with anything like what we have here now. You know, in the past, like York tried to keep something going, Oxford tried to keep something going, Mansfield closed theirs like after the parachute payments finished, and a lot of clubs will do that. You know, they'll keep the scheme going for a while, they're getting some funding, and now that the rules have changed and the funding would stop, very, very few. And you can see that. I mean, you know, sometimes when you look at team sheets and we do our match prep and watch the opposition and we know who plays and whatever, you don't often see teenagers in the opposition, and you very, very rarely see young players that come through a youth system. You might see them on loan, mightn't you, from a big club come in, but you rarely see kids come through. So when we put 4, 5, 6, 7 out in a game, sometimes in a starting 11, you know, I remember Lincoln were making a big song and dance about a kid who made a debut for 20 minutes at the end of a game at the end of last season. You know, I think in comparison, well, it's not comparable really.
There won't be many in the Football League outside the Premiership and the bigger Championship clubs with anything that compares to that.
Yes, people that know me know I'm going to have it asking questions that people don't want to ask you. Lovely system. Do you believe it's strong enough to take us on the conference? The question I would have is that obviously we've got a lot of players now who have come through the systems who are now in the 22, 23, 24-year-old area. We don't want to lose them, but are we seeing offers to move them on to better clubs? Or are we actually producing something which is producing players for the conference? Sorry to ask you, but I was just...
No, it's fine, it's no problem. I think that, listen, it's going to be difficult to answer this question without speaking about individuals. I think it's early to make that assumption. I think that you're never going to get promoted out of this league with only young players. So those young players have to be supplemented with the right quality of senior player, and that's a challenge with the wage structure that we have and the finances that we have. But I think that there's young players within our first team squad and below our first team squad that have the potential to play higher than the conference. Now, you might look at that and say, prove it, because no one has. But I think that, how old's Luke Berry? Is he 20? Just? How old's Jonathan Thorpe? Just 19. Should Robbie Wilmot have got to move to a club bigger than or higher in the football pyramid than Luton at that time? Probably. Josh Coulson and Rory, I suppose, are the oldest two. You know, I think it's difficult again because there's a camera and there's lots of people, but you know, my view of Josh Coulson is that he should have done better than he has. Personally, that's a compliment. You know, you can take it as criticism, but I think he could have and should have. And none of those players have come through the system from a young age. You know, when Josh Coulson, with respect, and I'm not being disrespectful, but at 12 years old, Josh Simpson, that's a Freudian slip. Josh Coulson was playing for Cherry Hinton Lions against Fulham Falcons. Now, our 12-year-olds are playing against Chelsea and Arsenal and Tottenham, and they're training 2 or 3 times a week, and they've been in that professional environment for a long time. So I think, yes, some of the young players are good enough to go higher. On their own, are they good enough to get this club promoted? No. But without them, we'd have no chance, because it's impossible to, when you get a budget and you're trying to think how we can get a good enough team to get out of this league, without the young players who cost a fraction of the wages that you'd expect to pay players of that quality from other clubs, it would be impossible. And 3, I think as time goes on and we see those players come through a centre, or an academy now we call it, where they're playing against the best teams in the country week in, week out, the quality will only go up as well in the future. If that answers you. John, add to that?
Yeah, I would add to that, in that I think to make the next step at some stage we need to be able to sign what I would call 2 or 3 marquee signings for this league that make the difference. So in any team you have a squad that, if you like, makes sure that you can compete, but you always need 2 or 3 special individuals that are just a cut above the rest to make the difference, to push you to the next level. Now, the easy way to do that is to go and pay 2 or 3 times the salary that we can afford and put the club in trouble. But there are other ways. One is by developing our own young players who get better and better and better the longer the system develops. But as Jez has already alluded to, we've got to start thinking outside the box in terms of where we get our players from. Because if A, you cannot compete for the so-called, and I say that very loosely by the way, the so-called better players in this league, if you cannot compete for them because of financial restraints, then you've got to look elsewhere. Now that can be young long players from bigger clubs, it can be from Scotland, it can be from the Czech Republic, it can be from Australia, it can be from a whole host of different areas. You know, in the past, the club have gone down the route of bringing someone like Andy Pugh from Welling or Harrison Dunk from Bromley, which is another way of doing it. I introduced Jez on Saturday to a good friend of mine who pretty much has the African market sewn up in terms of what we could and what we couldn't get. So I think in the future we've got to start looking outside the box as to how you can make the next step. Because as Jez already has said, and you've seen the figures yourself, we cannot go and attract Andre Gray or Fleetwood or whoever else you want to talk about because they're earning 3 times the salary that our players, our best paid players, are being paid. So, you know, we've got to think outside the box, which is what we try to do.
Well, first of all, welcome Richard to the club, and look forward to see what you can do for us. But my question is, with all these young players that go into these Premiership clubs to play football on a Saturday morning, and let's say we're on the same level as them, we look at the potential players going to them, is there any way at all that these clubs can sort of help to fund what we're trying to do, but in a small way? I mean, do they pay your expenses to go there? Do they give you anything when you get there, or can they contribute to anything we've got in this club?
Good question, Paul. I think the best thing they give us at the minute is their players, being honest, because there's not many conference clubs go and play at Tottenham, go and play at Chelsea, go and play at Arsenal. So that's the first thing they give us. The second thing they give us is a respect that if there's a player they want to sign, they will pay us compensation for that player, and they'll pay compensation in the right manner. You know, not a token gesture, but they'll pay what they would pay if we were in the programme. In terms of what we get with expenses and stuff like that, we probably get that more when we go abroad. You know, people would look at it and go, well, you say you've got no funding, how can you afford to go on all these tournaments? Because a lot of those tournament organisers, even like the big tournaments, will pay expenses and will pay for us to go because we're an English club. There's not a huge amount of redistribution of wealth in English football. That is a crying shame. And I read, Mark just showed me some questions beforehand, and one of them was about a nursery club or us having a relationship with a club. What we have to do is have a relationship with loads of clubs. You know, so we could say Norwich have helped us financially because Jed Steer is on loan with us from Norwich, and we're not paying anything like approaching his weekly wage. So I think that's where we have to try and use our relationships with different clubs. I think one of the most unusual things in speaking to Richard is very, very rare do you find someone who's an experienced manager and knows this level and works with senior players, but also has an unbelievable background in youth development as well. And when you've worked at clubs like Villa and Newcastle and Coventry and Nottingham Forest and the clubs he's worked at, what you get is loads of contacts as well. So it's one thing, I didn't play any of them, and I didn't play in the European Cup. So therefore, perhaps our contacts are ones that we've had to work really hard to get at youth level. There's a few doors can be opened when you've got contacts, which Richard has. So I think that's a big benefit for the club that we need to use as well. So might be some of the way that we get a favour from a bigger club might be with loan players of some of their better young players, where they help us with wages and stuff like that.
I think as well at the minute, because we play them on a weekend and they see what we're about, they see that we have good facilities, they see that we do it properly, then when they have players who reach the age of 16 who they decide they're not going to offer a scholarship to, then they're very happy to recommend them to come and visit us, because that's all they can do. And then once we've got them through the door, you've got a chance of signing them. And you know, they'll do it with us, but they won't do it with, I would say they'll probably do it with maybe 1 or 2 other conference clubs, but that's it. Because they want their players when they're released to be looked after in the future. So that's the benefit of those types of games and that competition.
I was interested to hear Richard say that his opinion was 2 or 3 perhaps key players just to push the first team squad to that extra level. In my opinion, some of the top sides in the Blue Square Premier, the ones that are at the top of the league or being at the top of the league, and the teams that have hurt us are players, teams that have got players with real genuine pace. Is that the type of player that you're thinking of? Is that one of the areas that you're thinking of that maybe we need to fill?
I think every coach or manager would say that he'd like to have more pace in his team, no matter how much he's got. So, without wishing to go into too much detail, I think there is an athletic profile of a modern day player, and that has to come very much at the forefront of who we sign in the future. So,
I think one of the things like Dunk we saw at Bromley, and the first thing you think is he can shift. You know, his pace sets him apart. I had a big, when you look at signings in the summer, we'll sit here now and we'll say, some have been good, some haven't been good, some haven't come off, some have come off. I had quite a big convincing job to do to the board to go into a tribunal for Tom Elliott. Because if you look at his playing record before he came here, he hadn't scored a goal with his left foot in his life. In fact, until he scored against Bath City last year, he hadn't scored a goal with his foot in his life in professional football. He scored 5 goals in 30-something games. But I saw him, and the one thing he's got, well, he's got lots of things, but the one thing that makes you sit up and look at him is, as well as being 6'5", he's quick. And if you wait for someone who's 6'5" and quick for him to score 20 goals, he costs 100 grand, and we can't afford him. So you have to take a punt on 1 or 2 of those. As well as doing that, we've got to sign 1 or 2 proven players, I think, that we know what we're going to get. Because the difficult thing is, for every Tom Elliott that scores goals and develops, and we can maybe help him move on and does well for us while he's here, and he shows his potential, there'll always be 1 or 2 that don't do that. So I think pace is a massive thing, you're right. And the profile of the player we look to bring in has got to, as best as you can, have that. But I think we need 1 or 2 proven performers as well. And they're the difficult ones. You know, you get a proven performer who's quick and he's got all the attributes everyone's looking for. They're the ones who command wages that get out of our league. That's the problem.
we've got to make room. We've got to try and make room in the budget somehow to be able to bring 1 or 2 players of that ilk in the future.
And I'll say one thing that, sorry, before you ask the question, if I've learned a lot of things in the last 2 years, and one of the things I've learned the most to help the club moving forward is that if you remember where we were a couple of years ago, we had a lot of high earning players here. Like players on double what the players are on now. High earning players. And the board made the decision to cut the budget, which we did, and to then impose a wage ceiling, which sent 10 players out of the club who all was over that wage ceiling, an individual wage ceiling, to make sure we had some financial discipline within the budget. If there's one thing I've learned is that one gets promoted. That one gets promoted, because what you end up with is a level group rather than a really best 11. And we've got to use the budget, I think, whereby for the right 2 or 3 players we have got to spend more money and we have got to spend more wages to make a difference to the 11 rather than make a strong, the 18th player is not too dissimilar to the 10th player, if you know what I mean. I think that's something that we've got to be disciplined financially, but we have to have a differential within that so that we can bring in players who will make a difference.
Is that your intention to do that in January?
I don't know whether we'll be able to do it in January, Paul. I think it's our intention that our planning is always, what can we do now? So we've done that with some loans to get people match practice and whatever else. What can we do in January? Window opens. Can we do a little bit of business in and out? And then really for us, it's going to be what we can do in the summer, because the best players tend to be available then rather than in January. And we've got to look at, you know, we've got lists on the wall of players out of contract. So we know who's out of contract in the summer. We know the 24-year-olds that are out of contract in the summer. That means no fee. So we've got to do, I think, more background work on bringing the right ones in the summer than necessarily trying to do it for the sake of it in January. I think it's difficult to do it in January.
I think if anything is going to be done in January, everyone needs to understand that there needs to be some pruning from the group that we already have. And if that's possible, then it would open up an opportunity to maybe bring in one or two that could make a difference. And I don't think it would take too much to make a significant difference to the group that we have.
Yeah, agree with that.
On that sort of subject, I'm at the back here, hi. I'm interested to know about the relationship between you two guys. Obviously Jez is the boss, and we know Jez is a very strong character, and Richard comes across as a very strong character as well. And
we can hear you. Put that down.
okay. So, right, yeah. So, what you were talking about, particularly come January, is that you're looking to reshuffle the squad, and potentially players will be going out the door. Now, a scenario might be where Richard says that player X should go, and Jez says player X shouldn't go. Who wins? And don't say you're going to discuss it and come to an amicable.
I'll answer that.
You start, and I'll add. Can I just say one thing before Richard starts? Is that I think when I made that decision that it was the right time to move aside, I met Richard and I met other people as well. And the one thing I was absolutely determined that we did was get someone good, someone experienced, someone who's going to be better doing it than I was, and someone who had a really strong character and personality, because it would be really, really easy, wouldn't it? And probably what most people would think would be step aside, but get a 35-year-old naive coach in who we know from a youth system somewhere, and he'll be a yes man and just nod his head and do what we want. So that wasn't the purpose of it. The purpose was getting the right man with a strong personality, which he's got, and a strong character who's experienced and adds to what we have at the football club. So before Richard tells you now how we'd settle the argument, which there wouldn't be, that's important. I think that the right person...
And maybe here in the past, certainly in other clubs, I would suggest in the past, it's relatively easy to, if you like, roughshod directors into making hasty decisions because you promised them the earth, or you promised them the best player since sliced bread, because at the end of the day, they are supporters just like everybody else. Now, under this structure, that will never happen. And I genuinely think that if something made financial sense and was possible financially, then within reason what I wanted, Jez would agree to. But he'd agree to it after there'd be some considered discussion as to why, as to where we're going forward, what are the reasons for. So some accountability, which there maybe isn't between managers, stroke coaches and boards. So it's a very, very modern and a very sensible structure that I think many clubs are already undertaking, and more will do in the future. So the decisions are not taken on an emotional basis, they're taken on a emotional plus business level. And I think that's crucial going forward.
Just to add to that, I think there's also a misconception sometimes that a decision comes along and there's a big meeting and one wants one thing and one wants another thing, and then you have to make a decision on what you do. We speak every single day, see each other every single day. Most days I'll go down to the training ground. I mean, there was a big Ferrari within some quarters on Saturday, I guess, because I sat in a different place or stood in a different place. We speak about the first team and the squad and the evolution of the squad all the time. So before this, we went out for a bite to eat and we're talking about players. We're talking about who's doing well, who's not doing well. We had an 11v11 game yesterday. Who did well? How did he do? How did he do? We're talking about the loan players, when they're going to come back, how they're doing when they're away. So it's constant, it's all the time. So it isn't just out of the blue, bang, we've got a decision to make about X, because it will never get to that point, because we're constantly talking about where we need to go forward. If you want to know where the lines are, I mean, I'm never going to sign a player that Richard doesn't want, because that would be crazy. But Richard isn't going to sign a player because he's going to go through me as the board member, if you like, to get those players who come in sanctioned. So we have to agree. So I think it's a good thing. Rather than one person makes a decision on someone, two people have to agree on a player coming in. I think on players going out, again, there's a consensus, because Richard's the first team head coach. He's picking the team. He decides on the tactics, he decides on how we're going to play. He decides on which substitutions happen, he decides on who's in the squad, who's in the first 11. So it'd be absolutely ridiculous, wouldn't it, for me to say, even though you haven't picked him for 3 months, he's staying, because I want him in. Never happened. It's what's best for the club, and it's two people's opinions, and we have to always come to the consensus about what's right for the club.
I think you can see evidence in the last 3 weeks. There's been a lot of decisions made after walking off the pitch, you know, from that ramshackle of a performance at Newport, when something needed to be done, you know. And as the manager, I already know that there isn't enough in the budget to do what you really would like to do. So Jez said to me, if you could do one thing, what is it? And I said, I think we need to bring a goalkeeper in on loan. Now that's no disrespect to Hedge or anybody else, and Jez signed Hedge in the summer. But I just felt it was clearly obvious that the relationship between the goalkeeper and back four wasn't right. You can't change the whole back four, because you couldn't, A, you couldn't get players, and B, you wouldn't be able to afford them. So if you like a sacrificial lamb, you can call it what you like, but I decided that we needed a goalkeeper, and Jez fully supported it. You know, by the same token, you know, we also felt, I felt, that there were too many players on the training ground who couldn't play on a Saturday. So all of those decisions on who's gone out on loan, we've made between us. But if you like, I've made the decision, and Jez, knowing that that's the decision because they're not playing, is common sense. So, you know, I really don't think that there are any problems to foresee going forward. So, yeah.
And when you know, for example, when we bring players in, listen, every signing without a doubt isn't a success. We all know that. But we try and do our best to mitigate that. We try and do our homework. We try and watch people. We try and do things right. So if it gets to a point where scout's been out 3 or 4 times, watched the player, recommends a player, we'll both go and watch him. We'll go and watch the game together. So we'll have an opinion on whether that's a player that we both feel is going to benefit the club, is going to be within the wage structure, fits the profile. We'll decide that. We're not going to have one of us who's going off watching him, oh, I like him more than you like him, and we'll have a fight to decide who it is.
I think the key thing here is as well, and probably Jez found this a little bit when he was the manager and somebody else was, if you like, in control of the coaching of the team. It's only the person that picks the team that's got the jigsaw in his head. No one else. You know? And as long as you can professionally portray that jigsaw to the person who is your immediate line manager, as it would be in any business or any walk of life, then I think decisions are made rationally, professionally and correctly.
I agree with that, and I also think that the way football's going, you know, back in the day, everyone played 4-4-2, squeeze up, hit it long, every tactic, every game was pretty much the same. I think the way football's evolving is that you'll find more coaches are managers than managers are managers, if that makes any sense to you. You'll have more Brendan Rodgers type appointments, Steve Clark type appointments, people who take every coaching session on the training ground and would consider themselves to be first and foremost a coach rather than the Harry Redknapps, the Martin O'Neills, the archetypal managers, the ones who motivate players and get someone else to do the coaching.
And since the year dot, we are the only country in the world that would have what you would consider to be a manager. No one else does.
And from my perspective, apart from the crux of the matter, which is the Saturday afternoon and the picking of the team, my job hasn't changed by 1,000,000%. But Richard is the one now coaching those coaching sessions, taking those training sessions. But as he said, he's the one with the, that's what I want, and he's able to go and work with the players every day to get what he wants on the pitch. And I think that's the way forward, I do honestly. And I think I felt that quite quickly this season, that it was the way forward. And therefore you make that decision. And you have to make sure that the person you bring in is good enough to do it. And he is. And therefore, without us sitting here going, oh yeah, we get on brilliantly, we do get on well, because it's obvious we would, because you get someone to do the job who believes and shares in the values and the philosophy that the club's got. If you go out and you sign a manager who just wants to wheel and deal, doesn't want to coach, doesn't want to develop, wants to do this and that, we'd have a row every 5 seconds of every day and it'd be carnage. But you get the right person, because the coach has to fit the profile of the club no differently than the players have to fit the profile of the club, in my opinion. If you get the right person who's good, you don't have any problems. And it's very difficult sometimes when you watch the team play on a Saturday, so all your judgment on all the work that happens at this football club, quite rightly, is based on 3 o'clock to 4:45 on a Saturday, 7:45 to 9:30 on a Tuesday. When we were losing and when things weren't right, I'm saying publicly, but there's good work going on at the training ground. There's good work. He's good. The coaching's good. The sessions are good. The players are responding. Sometimes there's a time lag between that getting translated onto a football pitch on a Saturday afternoon and a Tuesday night. And that's where we have to have the strength of our convictions to know that we're doing the right thing. And we do need to tweak things, and we do need to add 1 or 2 and move 1 or 2 on and whatever else. But it's not a million miles away from being a competitive outfit in this league, I think.
Are there any ambitions left for this year? Is it anything possible?
Win, win, win.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it, isn't it? You know, football's one of those things.
I was really talking about.
What position?
Final position.
I don't think you can do that. For me, I think you just have to focus on the now, which is we've got a tough game on Tuesday, so we try and prepare to win that. We have a tough game then the Saturday. I hear Richard say it every time I listen to an interview, and I've probably said it every time I had an interview. There isn't an easy game in this league. You know, we can all go, oh, how bad a Hyde. Well, bad enough to beat Newport away and bad enough to beat Grimsby at home. They're the top 2, I think. Do you know what I mean? No, Chris, so what I'm saying is, you can't pick your points. You don't know how many points you're going to get. I'd like us to finish as high as is mathematically possible with the number of points we've got left.
What bookmakers laugh at me at the moment? Can I laugh at him at the end of the season?
What have you got?
I think.
What have you got? Top what?
Well,
not top 1. I think, listen, we could all pluck a number out, couldn't we? I wish we finished this, that, or whatever. But it's just that we just got to go into every game.
I'll try and answer it as plain as I can. However long I'm at this football club, I think you will get to know that you won't get any bullshit from me. Okay? I think in the last couple of weeks, last 3 games, there's been some promise, some momentum, albeit small. And if we can continue that, who knows what can happen. I think the most important thing, first and foremost, is to get ourselves into a stable position whereby we can play with some comfort to push on and hopefully surprise a few people. Anything's possible in football, anything. You know, and the league is very tight from 8th downwards. It's very tight. And look, let's see what we can do in January. But I'm not going to make any false promises. All I'm going to say to you is that the aim is to continue improving as we have done over the last couple of weeks. And if we can do that with some consistency, then anything's possible. It is. I think this is the sort of year where a record low could finish 5th and a record low could win it, because everybody beats everyone else this year. Yeah. And the second half of the season could be completely topsy-turvy, the opposite way round, almost.
Newport proved that, haven't they?
Well, look, I think it's an even league this year. You know, in the past 3 seasons, you've had Stevenage who beat everybody up to win it. You've had Fleetwood who bought their way to the title. Sorry, Crawley who bought their way to the title, and Fleetwood almost the same. There is no one like that this year. So it's going to be very, very even at the top of the league. But what it also means is that we don't want to be looking over our shoulder, because it is going to be concertinaed. So let's get ourselves stable, let's get into January, and let's see where we go from there. So just let's continue the progress that I think we've made over the last couple of weeks, first and foremost. And that continues with another big test for them on Tuesday. You know, we were I had a little talk to them yesterday before we played a practice match in the afternoon. You know what I mean? I ain't forgetting that Newport game in a hurry. I'll tell you that now. And so let's let nobody get carried away that because we go to flipping Billericay and win 3-0, everything's forgiven. And that's where I'm coming from. Right? It'll take a long time to get that. It'll take a long time to get that defeat out of my system. I can promise you that. So we won't let the players away with anything.
You know I got a speeding ticket that night as well,
Did you? What was it? What was you doing? 62 miles an hour?
I think probably it's time to... Is it time
Any
to
more,
wrap
Mark?
up? No, one more. Please.
Yeah, can I just ask Richard? Richard, you've talked about thinking outside the box to bring players in from maybe different countries, different cultures. Do you think that players can adapt to the glamour and the the style of play of blue square conflict?
No, I don't think you could bring a number in. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But I think you could bring one who might just be a little bit more, if you like, out of the ordinary, and hope that you can integrate into.
I think as well, Keith, you probably wouldn't look in Spain and Italy and Brazil. No, seriously, no, that's why. You look in some of the lower leagues in Scotland, maybe Ireland, Czech Republic, certain mentality. I think it's got to be certain countries it works for, Scandinavia, certain countries we won't look.
Well, I mean, looking back when we slid out the football league, when we had like
absolutely. I think you're 100% right. I think certain mentality is what you're looking for. You've got to cope with the barriers away.
Yeah, I think the other thing, I agree with that. But when you're looking at people who are going to make the difference, generally it's a dribbler. It's someone that can beat players, open up doors when others can't. Go at people 1v1, and those players can come from a number of origins. Let's put it that way. And let's be honest, you can pay a lot of money for that type of player from the blue square and buy someone who's absolutely useless. So
you only got Adam Harriott that can do that, though.
Has he suddenly developed 5 yards of pace that I don't know about?
Listen, I'll put a one line for Adam Marriott. Right? I took a phone call off him a day in front of Dave, so I said just so you can prove it later that I'll speak to him. Adam Marriott's been with us since he's 14 years old, and there is no one here, I'll add Richard to it to make 2 of us, who want Adam Marriott to do better. We probably want it more than Adam Marriott does. Alright? Now, he goes out on loan, we watch him. I drove to Worcester at the start of the season to watch him when he was playing for Bishop Stortford. We've watched him 3 or 4 times with Cambridge City. We'll watch him on Monday week because he plays at Hitchin. Someone will go and watch him. Matt will go and watch him on Tuesday again when they play at home against Banbury. Maz played in an 11-a-side yesterday. Everything we can do to get Adam Marriott to transform ability, potential, to doing it at the right tempo on the football pitch we'll do. We want to do that. But some of the responsibility is with Adam Marriott.
I think the thing is, well, my response there to Marriott in relation to the question was that, we're talking about people who can dribble 1v1, beat people with real pace. Whatever Adam Marriott's merits are, it's not that player.
Too small as well.
Listen, we can all have our own opinions about players, and I don't think it's right to air them here. You know what I mean? I was asked a question about bringing players from outside the country, and my answer to that was someone who can make a difference is probably going to be a dribbler, someone who can turn and beat people in confined spaces and make the difference. And to suggest Adam Marriott in that sort of ilk would be wrong. Not that I don't think he's a good player, because I think he is.
Talking about speed and flair in the teams, I mean, we play a pretty good 4-4-2, but when we're playing hellhole sides away, do we have any warriors in our side? You know, who's the captain who's on the pitch, who's going to drag the team by the bootstraps so that these flair players can have their moments? Because I watch all the games I've done for years. I don't see too many of these players in our squad who are going to really take, you know, people like Paul Carden used to, Brown, Hatswell, Peters. These are like true warriors who the fans love them. But I don't see that in our team.
I think I'll just, before Richard goes in detail, I'm not going to talk about the squad. I mean, I think we've got brave players and honest players. Have we got loads of natural leaders? I think that's a dying breed in football, full stop. Natural leaders. I think it's a... Yep.
It just turned...
Absolutely. Listen, if I have the biggest regret of our season was Kev Roberts getting a whack on his hip on the Monday before we played Lincoln. But because he's a massive loss, and it speaks volumes of his character, how he can come back into the game against Macclesfield after hardly training and perform so consistently well. And he's got that, Kev Roberts is, I don't know, was he 23, Kev, 22, 23? He's that going on 30. You know, he's a leader, and he is that. But there aren't many of them around. And I've been talking the last couple of days with some of the scholars, you know, second-year scholars, about putting things right on the football pitch. They find it difficult. Society doesn't create leaders at the moment, and I think that they cost money. And I think one of the things, when you look at the profile of our squad, we haven't got many of those experienced players. But the reason we haven't got many of those experienced players that you described, like some of the names you've given out there, is they cost more money than the players that are on at the minute. So I'm not saying we haven't got any, but I'm saying we haven't got them in abundance, and it's something that you have to look at. But they're hard to find them, good leaders and good experienced players.
Yeah, that's why they're the leader.
Exactly.
Well, just one on that, Jez. When you talk about we might want 2 or 3 players, and we had the wage ceiling, if you like, but at that time you also kind of put an age ceiling on the team.
Well, the wage ceiling, if this rhymes, put an age ceiling.
Yeah, but...
No, I'm being serious. If you put a wage ceiling, you put an age ceiling. And that's the problem. So we can sit here and talk about every potential signing that we bring at the club. But in the summer, and even last summer, if you say, right, we're only going to pay X, it's very, very difficult to sign players 24 to 30 years old of the right quality. Very, very difficult. You can sign Dunk because he's at Bromley and he's a young kid, isn't he? 20 years old. He wants a chance. You can sign Andy Pugh because he's at a level below and he wants to get back into professional football. You can sign Tom Elliott because he's scored 5 goals in his life and he wants a chance. No, that's right though, isn't it? He's not a proven player, so he's got potential. You know, you go through it. You can sign Adriano Moke because he's played 390 minutes in his professional career, even though he's come on a sub 20 times or whatever else. Those players we can afford. You want to start going from the 24 to 30-year-old proven men who are leaders, like we said, outside our wage, so that the wage cap dictates your age bracket. And what happens then is you have a squad where the demographic of the squad, the age band of the squad, isn't quite right. We've probably brought in the summer too many younger players. If you think back a year ago, I was so conscious of that. You know, the ones we signed was Wild, 24, 25, Steady. You know, Gashi, knew him when he was a young'un. Shorey, we knew him because Ginger was at Russian and Diamonds with him. Players who we managed to get hold of in that mid-20s bracket. But to get the right players at that age group costs more than that individual wage ceiling. So like I said, I think that's something we've got to reassess so that the age band in the squad is a little bit more balanced, and therefore yeah, some players may be on a little bit more money, some on a little bit less money, but that's how we've got to spend the budget. I think it's always wise though to think back to what the club had done in the past, and most decisions get made to correct a previous mistake, don't they? And they do, and that's what happened. Because the club was throwing out 2- and 3-year contracts to people in their 30s on massive money, we made a decision to ensure a bit of stability. I think one of the big benefits of splitting the job up is that the coach wants a player, and there's some, then you discuss it with someone else and you come to the right decision for the club. When I was both, if you like, very difficult to do that. You end up, you will make mistakes because you haven't got the person to go through it, discuss it, is it right, is it wrong, which way do we go? So the financial stability will still be there, the discipline will still be there, but I think we have to just be aware that we can't get the right players at the right age if we don't slightly change that wage cap.
I think the other thing as well is when you're looking at a budget for a team, it's not too dissimilar to looking at your own household budget. You know, you have to make room for food, you have to make room for fuel, you have to make room for heating, you have to make room for whatever, insurance, whatever you want to do. And without all those things covered, you know, things don't work in your household. So when you're putting a team together, I think the crucial thing is where do you spend that money in terms of getting value for money. So what I'm trying to say is, you know, whatever's gone on in the past, where I think we need to go in the future is that sort of 1 to 14 in your squad are nailed on players, and 2 or 3 of those, if you like, are marquee players. Then 15 through to 20 are, if you like, 2 or 3 squad players that can play in 2 or 3 positions, 2 or 3 young players. And then we've already alluded, Jez has already alluded that in the summer, what we've got or ended up with is a group of maybe 18 or 20 players. They're all, if you like, a little bit similar in terms of ability. Now, I don't think that's going to get us promoted in the future. So we've got to divide the budget up a little bit better, be prepared to put our neck on the block, to pay a little bit more for 1 or 2, whilst always knowing that the budget cannot be surpassed. And that's what it is. And it doesn't matter which football club you're at, it's what it is. And really, it's all determined by how much the directors at the end of the day are prepared to put their hands in their pocket and carry on continuing subsidising the team. You know? Now, we've already seen and we've already discussed where this club wants to go. I think that's right for the long-term sustainability of this football club. We need to get this club through to 2015 in a really stable position. And if everything goes to plan in 2015, we can maybe go into that season with a new stadium, a whole new era, a whole new philosophy, and really push on. But in the meantime, we want to get promoted. And that's what we're going to try and do.
Back to the point earlier about the young players that you made, that's why they're so crucial. Because if you look at, I don't know, you know when you talk about pound for pound boxers, you know, if you went pound for Rory McCauley, we'd be massively in credit what we get from him. And and when you look at Liam Hughes, who can literally cover 6, 7 positions, and he's a young lad, and he's not on big money, they're the ones that are absolutely crucial to be able to bring in players who make a difference. That's the only way you can do it. You can't, there's no other way of doing it unless we have some of those players who can fill a few positions, aren't on the top money, but are good enough to go into the team.
It was kind of linked to the question we had here. You know, Richard's talking about marquee players, and he's alluded to actually skill levels, if you like. But, you know, could it be that one of those marquee players needs to be somebody that's slightly older?
Absolutely. And it might be someone in the middle of the team who's a dominant leader. Absolutely.
So do you see a wage cap still applying for the under 24s and like a flair player who can
listen, I think that in the past, before I did this job, the managers of this club were given, there's your budget. Whether it was £1 million, 900,000, 600, whatever the number was, just spend it. Now, what the board, I don't think, realise is that isn't a 1-year budget if you sign players on £1,000 a week on 3-year deals. That's when you get a massive problems. And that's what had to be remedied. So from my perspective, the big part of my job has got to make sure that whatever we spend is value and is the right player and is on the right length of contract, and the club, the board, understand the financial commitment when you sign a player on a contract, because it's not just divvying up a certain amount of money for 1 year.
It's time, don't you? Right, well I think that's...